Welcome, everybody, to this evening's discourse and discussion on this continuing series of classes that we're having on the topic of magnetism, and particularly magnetism in the face of the situation that we find ourselves in now, facing this coronavirus. This evening, I would like to start with a story, and you'll understand the theme as I go along with this story and how it applies to what I want to talk about tonight. And when Swami Kriyananda was a boy, he was born in Romania because his father was an oil geologist. His father was American, but he worked for Esso Oil Company and was posted to Romania in those days, which would have been in the 1930s. And as Swami was growing up, Swami was born in 1926, and so as he was growing up and he got to be about 8 or 10, 12 years old, thereabouts, his parents sent him to Switzerland to be in school there, to continue his education in Switzerland. And plus the doctors had recommended that they thought the air would be better for him there, he'd be more healthy there, and so on. And Swami was sent to Switzerland, and he said it was actually quite a difficult time for him because he was lonely there. His friends that he'd grown up with in Romania that were not there, and you can imagine how that would feel. Well, he was in a boarding school, a boys' boarding school, and in this boarding school, as is often the case in these kinds of situations, unfortunately, even up in those days and even now today, what do you have in such places where you have many kids of many age groups? And Swamiji was not a big man or big boy, and he was he was young when he first went in there, but there was bullies in the school. And there was one particular bully that took a particular dislike to little Don, Swami Kriyananda, as he was called as a boy, and took a particular dislike to him. And it was probably, my guess, is because Swami didn't pay any heed to him, probably didn't kowtow to him or, show him deference in any way. And it certainly didn't show him that he was afraid of him at all. And so, as bullies sometimes are, they take this as a direct threat and they challenge people. And so it came that the bully kept threatening Swami, and one day cornered him and got him into his room and basically started to beat him. And he beat him quite severely. And Swamiji said, well, he had no chance because he was a lot smaller. The bully was quite a bit bigger than him. And it wouldn't have been Swami's way anyway to defend himself in that way. So he said, all I could do, the fellow was on top of me, beating me, and all I could do was let him beat me. He says, and I didn't fight back. I just let him beat me. And until finally the bully ran out of steam. He says, but he didn't, in his heart, he didn't give in to the bully, which is what the bully really wanted of Swami. He wanted Swami to be different to him, to be afraid of him, to plead for him to stop. But Swami just kept silent and let him beat him. And eventually, he says, finally the bully stopped, and Swami sort of wryly said, probably because he got too tired, and let him go and stomped out. And Swami just, obviously, he wasn't feeling too good about that, but he said from that day forward, that bully never bothered him again, completely avoided him, because Swami did not give in. Now, he had no choice but to allow that bully to do what he did. Nobody came to his rescue, but he didn't give in. And in a sense, in that way, he won, because the bully backed off and went his own way. And Swami inwardly, he was not afraid. He was never afraid, but he wouldn't subject himself and kowtow to this bully. And I mention that story because it's an inspiring one, and children, of course, can relate to that, because unfortunately, often kids do run into bullies in the neighborhood, but not to give in and to be frightened of them and to be able to stand up in that way. And unfortunately, you have to accept the consequences of it. But it was more important to Swami to inwardly resist, and he did. And this is, you could say, the theme of what I'm speaking about today. Is, if you read the title, I wanted to talk about endurance. Because sometimes it's like that. Endurance is, we have, as Shakespeare said, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune assailing us and attacking us. And sometimes, what can we do? We can try to avoid it. We can try to get away from it. We can try to hide from it sometimes. Not much we can do sometimes, even fight back about it. But we have to have the ability to endure. And this is what Sister Gyanamata said in her memoirs. She said, we must learn to endure. The spiritual path is often seen in terms of, experiences and wonderful things coming to us. He says, but unless you have this quality of endurance, you don't set the foundation for allowing those things to come to you, because you're thrown off course left and right by the slightest misfortune, the slightest difficulty that comes to us. And I think we can see this. We must understand this. Now, in yoga, or this title that I've given to these class series of magnetism, when we speak about magnetism, we're speaking about a subtle yogic concept of magnetism. We're speaking about this aura of magnetism that surrounds the body. And we're really speaking about an astral energy that, and as we know, we as yoga students, that we're more than this physical body. This physical body is just but one of other bodies that we have, an energy body that continues after this physical body is dropped, the body dies, the energy body continues. And then, of course, there's a causal body and a body of ideas that are beyond that. But this astral body is this energy body, is what we're speaking about. And to increase the energy flow within the body, and that energy flow increases the magnetism, that aura around the body that gives us our protection. But the physical body is but a reflection, or that astral body is the plans, the blueprint of which the physical body then is just made from. Now, in this energy body, this is a body of energy. There's energy flows, there's nerve currents in the body. And we speak in Kriya Yoga particularly, we speak about many of these nerve currents, particularly in the spine, associated with the breath. And if we could see, you might say, this energy body, we would see these nerve currents and this dynamic flows of energy, and we would notice in the spine that there are particular centers of energy, which I think most of you know are called chakras. And it's these chakras that regulate the internal flow of energy, life force within the body. There's a controlling energies to various parts of the body. And when the flows of energy are harmonious and the flows are not blocked and they're dynamic, the body outwardly will often, you could say, it's healthy, and it manifests physically outwardly in that way. But sometimes when there's blockages and energy is flowing not quite correctly or dynamically enough, it manifests itself outward in terms of physical maladies. Now, of these chakras, a question that often comes up when we're, as a teacher of these teachings, sharing them, somebody will often ask me, says, well, how do I awaken these chakras? How do I enliven them? How do I work with those chakras? Because this is what's happening as we dive deeper into the spiritual path. We begin those energy flows that are going through those chakras out to the senses. We begin to recall them and draw those energy flows inward and upward to the brain. So people read popular articles about awakening this chakra and awakening that chakra, or this is kind of a popular thing in amongst people. And so I'm asked these questions, and one thing I bring the conversation back to a certain point. If you want to harmonize these chakras, maybe, or harmonize the energy in the chakras to enhance the positive aspects of those chakras, what might we do? And what I encourage people is the best way to do that is to realize that every chakra is, you might say, the energy from that point in the body, and that energy center also is correlated with attitudes that we have. And we can see this. For example, we know that there's a heart chakra, and if I was to say, where do you suppose the attitude or those things that have to do with love are centered? And of course, we'd say, well, that's the heart, of course. And this is, I don't think one needs to be a yogi to understand that or to come up with, guess the right answer. But some are a little bit more obscure. And the throat chakra is associated with calmness. Well, the quality I'm speaking about today is associated with that chakra, which is said to be at the bottom of the 7 chakras, the Muladhara chakra. And the Muladhara chakra is a very important chakra because it forms the foundation, you might say, of our energy body, being at the bottom. And if you're going to build a house, you want to build that house on stone. You don't want to build it on sand. And so we want to have a very firm basis upon which we build our energy body, but let's take that a little bit more subtly. A very firm foundation upon which we build our spiritual life. And we have to look at those attitudes that are associated with the various chakras. Now, an attitude of devotion, as I mentioned, with the heart, but what are the attitudes that we associate with this Muladhara chakra? Because, here's the thing, the stimulation of that chakra will reflect itself in attitudes. And the reverse is also true. If we work on our attitudes in daily life, in our interface with other people, if we work on our attitudes and improve them, it has an effect upon the chakra and it harmonizes the energy in that chakra. It releases blockages, you might say, to our personality, to our expression. The flow of life force begins to be enhanced in that area. And so consequently, it goes both ways. And so if we want to awaken the chakras, as you sometimes see in class titles, change your attitude. And the attitudes of the Muladhara chakra is those things that are foundational upon which everything else, in terms of our spiritual life at least, is built. For example, steadfastness. I'm steady as a rock. Firmness of purpose. The ability to stick to it, the stick-to-itiveness, if you will, the ability to have that solidity, that, you know, some people, I can always count on them. They're always there. They're solid as a rock. Commitment. People, they say something and they do it. They're not flighty, which is a quality of a different chakra. They have that solidity of personality that allows them to be successful in building upon. Now, these are the positive sides. Now, every chakra has a positive and negative side to it. And the negative side, of course, of those solidity qualities would be something like, well, he's absolutely firm in his opinion, but he's stubborn. He doesn't name it. In other words, that's the negative side of it. You see, a person can be stubborn, not able. He just sticks to it for no good reason, just egoic reasons or ignorant reasons. You know, so that's like that. Loyalty, you know, is a positive quality, but blind loyalty to untruth, obviously, that's not so good either. So you have to see everything's got a positive and negative side, and so so bringing out the positive side of something is what we want to do. And the topic I wanted to introduce tonight in terms of increasing our magnetism is this quality of endurance. We have to endure in the face of adversity, in the face of difficulties. But there are two sides to endurance as well. There's the negative side of endurance, and you could say that, going back to that story of Swami, is a negative side of endurance was I can't do anything about it. I'm going to let life beat me up, but I'm going to make my sense. I'm not going to be able to feel anything. So life's challenges come to us, and some people, you find this, they face life's challenges because they can't do anything about it, so they turn off their feelings and they become numb to the world. And sometimes people are that way. They're numb because they don't want to be hurt. Emotionally hurt. I mean, physically is usually not the case, that we don't run into bullies day to day, but people are, they turn off their feelings. They don't want to be hurt. And so they endure the slings and arrows, but they do it by totally closing off their ability to feel, which is, of course, here in the heart center. That's not what we mean by endurance. Endurance means to face life heroically and endure the slings and arrows. Heroically to be able to face it, because it's a matter of who. Swami was not defeated in that encounter with the bully because he never gave up. Inwardly, he resisted. He couldn't do anything outwardly about it, but inwardly he resisted, and he never gave up. And this is the quality that Sister Gyanamata was speaking about when she spoke about the necessity of learning to endure whatever comes, because when we take up the spiritual path, we think that, oh, now the doors of freedom are going to open for me. Well, it's not like that at all. You somehow, Divine Mother, I think she doesn't throw roses out on her pathway. She throws the rose stems with all the prickles on it in her path, sometimes just as much to test us and to toughen us up. Maybe we could look at it that way, but good and bad is going to continue to come. And I think when we enter onto the spiritual life and we say to God, I want you, Lord, Lord is going to test us. Is he really saying that true? And so consequently throws little obstacles. And if you can't endure, oh my God, you're gone. And you have to be able to pass the tests in life. And some of that times is just sticking to it and suffering the consequences until finally Divine Mother says, okay, you pass, and then you go. And this quality is not an easy one. And I'm not saying to endure without, sometimes you have to do something, but sometimes you can't do anything. And still, that's what you have to do until finally you get the chance to be able to do something. Then you act, of course you do. And so this quality is important for us in the spiritual path, but in terms of our magnetism, if you think of our magnetism as an aura, you might say a bubble of strength around us. And if every little atom or meteorite or whatever it is of discord comes to us and hits it, and it pops, and because it has no strength. And this is what gives that. I'm talking about building strength of character to be able to withstand whatever comes. But how do we do that? I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, obviously, it's built upon faith, of course, that there's something deeper and some reason behind it, and that you do have strength and help on a deeper level, because God is not going to let you down when it comes right down to it, but God may very well test you along the way. But what are some things we can, you might say, images that I want to share with you that you might think of it this way. Endurance, you could say, is like the ocean. All the rivers and streams, and you could think of those as adverse circumstances, flow into the ocean. But the ocean's not affected. It stays, the level stays the same. And this is how it is with us. So when we go through life and that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Oh, now we got a virus. Oh my God, and I lost my job, and I got a pay reduction. Now things are not working outwardly. Do we fall apart? No. Now, can we fight back? Sometimes, but maybe we can't. We just have to grit our teeth and go on. Say, okay, I'm going to go forward. It's not going to dissuade me off my chosen path. And we go. Now, another image might be, which is one that's often, the image of the difference between the oak tree and the reed. And I think every child in school has learned that probably. The image, the storybook of the great oak tree who is so proud of himself, and the little reeds in the pond at its feet, and the oak tree bragging how strong it was. But then the storm came, and the wind blew strong, and the oak tree was toppled over on its side. But the reed, it went over as the wind blew, and when the wind stopped, came back up. And it was able to endure because of why? It would go with the wind, and it was able to adapt and go with the wind. It didn't resist the wind and fight what would ultimately be a losing battle, and it was able to wend its way ultimately to victory. So that might be another way to look at it. But the one I've often used in teaching classes is that of the sailor who sails his boat on the ocean, and the wind comes up. And when the wind comes up, all you can do, you have to pull the sails down. You pull the sails down when the storm comes, and you just go with the wind, and you pull the sails down. And if the waves get very high, you hang on to the mast. And now, of course, what is the mast? Of course, if you're devotee, you know what I mean there. You hang on to those core values: God, Guru, your spiritual life, that which is, guiding you in your life. You hang on and let the wind blow, and then eventually the wind stops, and you lift your mast up again. So this quality is something we have to cultivate, and we shouldn't wait for a pandemic to come in order to increase our endurance. You hope by this time you have exercised it. And I think in little ways, and of course you could say, I've given examples of exercising it, the contest of who can outlast the other in the cold or the heat, I've told you the cold one, but the other side of it is, when I was a young man in the 20s, I worked with a lot of, crews of other young men, and we'd go out and do a lot of different things. And one time, a group of about 6 of us, we went and we were building a house far away from another village, so we had to stay somewhere. And we stayed in this very nice place, actually, and they had a clubhouse that had a sauna. And what happens when you put 4 or 5 young men in the sauna? You know what's going to happen. I see I got an audience here of 1. And what happens is immediately they start saying, well, who can sit in here longest? And we turn the heat up. And so it's inevitable. And so 4 or 5 guys get in there. Sure enough, you turn the heat up and you're sitting there like this. Who's going to give first? Who's going to buckle? Who can stay in there longest? And sure enough, and I think this is a universal principle, because I've read a lot of studies about people in countries who have sweat baths, saunas. They all have this dynamic happens, and until finally but the idea here is, how much can I endure? And until finally, one by one person's left, and he very proudly comes out. Well, this is a fun thing I'm saying. Some people may be out there saying, what a bunch of idiots. Well, yes, but I ascribe it to being youthful. But I don't do that anymore. But it's good exercise, though, to challenge yourself in little ways like that. Now, that's physically. But really, the deeper ones is to challenge yourself with little circumstances in your life. That irritating person in the office, And you got to put up with that person again and again and again. And you wish they would go away, something would stop, or that somebody's got some habits that you don't like. Some people are just not fitting according to your feelings of how they ought to be. They maybe they're even misbehaving a little bit, and you're thinking you got to be the one to correct them. You don't have to be the one to always correct them. Why not next time? Assuming, of course, nobody's life and limb is at stake. Just endure. Why are you letting it bother you? Why let anything in life bother you? Why let anything in life defeat you? And you only are defeated when you give up, when you succumb. See, that's enough. And actually, interestingly, Paramahansa Yogananda said, actually, people would never die if they were able to keep. Well, assuming, let's say that you're not blown out on an accident or something, but if your body is failing and illness is taking you, says, there comes a point when your will finally says, okay, that's enough. Now, this assumes you have a high enough consciousness to maintain your conscious level. Most people don't. They tend to go unconscious or subconscious. But if you're able to maintain your consciousness to the very end, there comes a point when you say, okay, that's enough, and you allow yourself to go. Now, I don't know. I mean, that seems a little strong statement, and if it's really true, but I could see a person of dynamic will, like a master, for instance, can say, no, I will leave my body when I choose. And so Master said, if you have strong enough will, you can choose when to leave your body. Now, that's interesting. Now, that's not really, I wouldn't say endurance, because endurance is, just putting up with something and building that inner strength. But nevertheless, the principle is here. Learn to endure. And in that way, you'll see, like the bully, it backs off and it goes away. And whatever it was that was bothering you so much, it leaves you alone. And then you really do have victory in that way. And you'll see that life is like that. But if it bothers you and you continue to succumb to it, it's going to come again and again and again until finally you say, look, we're going to have a showdown here. And yes, maybe it'll beat you up a little bit, but don't succumb to it. And you'll find that you'll come out the winner on the other side. Now, the other side of this, of endurance, you could say endurance is being able to absorb whatever life gives you, but not absorb it passively in the sense of low energy, but heroically facing whatever comes. Now, you could say the other side of the coin, and that instead of just receiving and putting up with it, is actually doing something persistently. And I think persistence and endurance have a certain relationship, because to persist in something, even against continued failure, is to just continually put out dynamic energy, whereas the endurance is a little bit more of a passive energy, but to put out a dynamic, repeat again and again and again. There's that wonderful little story that Master told that of the squirrel, the bushy tail. Certainly in California, there's these gray squirrels that have the squirrel might be this big, but its tail is like that big, and it's mostly just a big bushy tail. Gray squirrel. And he says the gray squirrel, mama gray squirrel, and her baby were walking on the ocean. And as they were close to the water, a big wave came, and it came in and it grabbed the baby squirrel and took it out into the ocean. And the mama squirrel was so upset that she demanded of the ocean, give my baby back. And the ocean just laughed at her. And he says, and the squirrel said, if you don't give me my baby back, I am going to dry you up. And again, the ocean just laughed. So what the little squirrel did is it would take its tail and went down to the ocean, soaked it in water, went up to the higher and shake it out again and again and again. And he persisted, persisted, persisted. And the ocean just kept watching and watching. How foolish. He kept watching and watching. And, said, and I guess you would say the ocean's conscience was pricked a little bit, until finally, after this had gone on so long, and the squirrel said, "I will not stop until I dry you up, and my body will perish, but I will dry you up." And the ocean, after quite a long time, finally conceded, say, "Yes, I give you." And the wave came, and the baby squirrel came back. And Master used that story, cute little story, to illustrate the persistence that we must have to be able, once we know that something, this is what I want to do, I'm going to persist in this. And so you can see persistence is when you can actually do something. When you cannot do something, you might say it's endurance, be able to, whatever life chooses. So those two qualities, or you could say are qualities of the Muladhara chakra. And until we have them, and especially that endurance side of it, we're not going to be able to build the foundation of our spiritual life upon it, because we'll find ourselves flighty. We'll find ourselves shaken by the smallest things. We find that we don't have a solid base under our feet, and we don't make that progress that we want. And as Swami used to say about Hatha Yoga, what's the most important Hatha Yoga position? Learning to stand firmly on your own 2 feet. And from there, everything else then proceeds, and our spiritual life then can proceed joyously to our goal. But in the case of what we're speaking about here in terms of magnetism, when you have that ability to put out that kind of energy and to endure whatever comes, you build that strength, and know. So you basically, you're saying, no matter come what may, I'm here. I'm going to. I'm behind this wall of castle of peace, and nothing and no one is going to be able to penetrate it. Send what you will, Lord. Send what you will, circumstances, but I will endure. Until finally it passes, and then I raise my sail once again and sail on to my divine goal. So keep those in mind. And I'll see you next on Monday evening for another episode of Magnetism in the Face of Adversity. Much joy to you, and thank you for joining me this evening. And as I always say, if you have questions, please submit the questions, send them on in, and I'll try to get to them as best I can, as soon as I can. Om Guru.